Mariana, e stasera facciamo due chiacchiere veloci su che cos'è la blockchain, la tecnologia della blockchain brevemente, e come questa può supportare lo sviluppo dell'IoT, dell'Internet of Things. Per chi di voi non sapesse o non avesse chiarissimo che cos'è una blockchain, due parole in 3 minuti. La blockchain è praticamente un registro, si realizza con un software che viene distribuito su molti nodi, che sono i nodi della blockchain, la rete blockchain, e che è rappresentato questo registro come una catena di blocchi, una sequenza di blocchi. All'interno di ogni blocco ci sono le transazioni o le informazioni che vogliamo inserire nella blockchain. La blockchain è in grado di raggiungere tra tutti i nodi che la rappresentano un consenso univoco su quali modifiche che vengono fatte al registro sono da considerarsi valide, e tutto ciò riesce a farlo senza che ci sia un ente centrale o anche un proprietario o chiunque vogliate sia diverso dai nodi stessi della rete, che quindi sono tra di loro alla pari, e riescono quindi a raggiungere questo consenso da soli. Le principali caratteristiche di un software blockchain sono l'immutabilità, cioè tutto quello che viene inserito nella blockchain non può essere modificato più né cancellato, e si intende che neanche il team che ha sviluppato quella blockchain è in grado più di eliminare le cose che vengono inserite all'interno. È tracciabile pubblicamente, quindi chiunque può risalire a partire da una transazione dall'indirizzo a tutte le transazioni che hanno interessato quell'indirizzo, ed è sicura perché utilizza sistemi di crittografia più evoluti disponibili per assicurare che chi usa la blockchain non venga frodato. Ovviamente la più famosa applicazione di questa tecnologia è il Bitcoin, che tutti quanti sicuramente avete sentito. Quindi è un registro pubblico che si trova condiviso su una serie di nodi di una rete, è criptato ed è in grado di validare da solo, come software, senza l'intervento di garanti in mezzo, le transazioni che vengono inserite all'interno di esso. Quindi si inseriscono dei dati all'interno della blockchain, questi dati vengono raggruppati fino a formare un blocco. Questo blocco, quando è pronto, viene sigillato, okay? E la chiave che sigilla questo blocco viene in qualche modo inserita all'interno dei dati e delle transazioni del blocco successivo. Questa funzionalità di fatto consente, realizza la cosiddetta catena di blocchi, poiché se qualcuno modifica un dato che si trova in un blocco precedente, questa modifica cambia la chiave di quel blocco che però è inserito nel blocco successivo, di conseguenza cambia i dati del blocco successivo e così via fino all'ultimo blocco. Modificare una transazione richiede dover richiudere quel blocco e quindi richiudere anche tutti i blocchi successivi. Chiudere un solo blocco, ad esempio nel Bitcoin nel 2017 con un PC molto potente, con un hardware al costo di svariate migliaia di euro, richiedeva 150 anni. Ovviamente più i blocchi vengono aggiunti continuamente, più è chiaro che modificare o eliminare qualcosa dalla blockchain è materialmente impossibile. Si riteneva, adesso è ancora peggio, che dopo 6 blocchi il tempo necessario a modificare e a richiudere tutti i 6 blocchi sarebbe infinito, e questo dà l'immutabilità alla blockchain. Queste caratteristiche, quindi immutabilità, sicurezza e tracciabilità, sono caratteristiche fondamentali che aprono il mercato a tante applicazioni che sono sensibili alla sicurezza e appunto alla tracciabilità e all'immutabilità. Quindi vedete alcune, non sono tutte, ma a parte le valute digitali, quindi Bitcoin, piuttosto che la possibilità di fare prestiti o pagamenti internazionali con zero o quasi zero commissioni, esistono tutta una serie di applicazioni che si possono realizzare anche con utilità quotidiana, quindi il voto, ma anche la gestione delle proprietà intellettuali. Qualsiasi operazione che richiede un notaio può essere gestita da una blockchain praticamente a costo zero e con una garanzia di incorruttibilità di quello che viene fatto. se, diciamo adesso solo due parole sulla blockchain, se qualcuno di voi volesse interessare di più alla parte tecnica della blockchain, in Italia, sebbene l'interesse stia crescendo abbastanza rapidamente come negli altri paesi, ci sono principalmente piccole community, meetup che si organizzano, seminari. Ho visto qualche seminario fatto da qualche banca anche, ma il grosso delle risorse dovete ancora cercarle online, quindi su siti come Coindesk, che è in grado di darvi risorse, documenti su blockchain e bitcoin, e anche tutte le tecnologie e metodi di consenso che ci sono dentro. La vita quotidiana, diciamo, delle blockchain si svolge esattamente su Telegram, che è una chat che si usa praticamente per ospitare tutti i gruppi ufficiali dei vari team, su cui potete entrare in contatto direttamente con i team, o anche unirvi a community, credo ci sia in Italia blockchain Italia, blockchain Roma anche su Telegram. Oppure se vi sentite di partecipare attivamente, ovviamente la piattaforma GitHub vi consente di proporre le vostre modifiche al software, individuare errori nel software, ma anche di, se volete, partecipare attivamente ad esempio alle traduzioni piuttosto che il sito web del software o anche alla documentazione. Io personalmente, proprio vagando su alcune di queste piattaforme, mi era stato chiesto di valutare il progetto IoTeX da un utente, quindi dal punto di vista tecnico, quindi ho letto il white paper, tra l'altro qui la versione in italiano se qualcuno lo vuole dare uno sguardo. Ho letto il white paper e sono rimasto scioccato quasi, non so se qualcuno di voi è andato a dare uno sguardo. Praticamente a noi è prima vista perché praticamente un articolo accademico che già vi dà un'idea del team che c'è dietro. E a quel punto sono andato con curiosità a indagare un po' di più sul sito e sulla community, e ho avuto modo di entrare in contatto direttamente con gli amministratori e vedere come tutte le cose che venivano gestite da questo team erano praticamente arte quasi digitale, perché rilasci software con precisione millimetrica, qualità del codice online eccellente, articoli accademici sulle innovazioni che stavano applicando la blockchain, quindi qualcosa di completamente diverso da quello che avevo visto in tutti gli altri progetti dal punto di vista della serietà e dei contenuti che c'erano dietro. A quel punto ho approfondito ancora di più e ho capito come l'applicazione della blockchain all'Internet of Things fosse veramente una strada maestra per la blockchain, perché a differenza di tutte le altre blockchain che sono in qualche modo applicate ad un settore piuttosto che a un altro, applicare la blockchain all'Internet of Things significa consentire a tutti i dispositivi elettronici di essere collegati tra loro e di sfruttare questa tecnologia, non più limitata a un PC o al massimo ad avere magari il portafoglio sul telefono. E questa è un po' una necessità obbligata per le previsioni del numero di dispositivi che saranno collegati a internet per il futuro e che voi o non voi dovranno utilizzare la blockchain. E quindi alla fine tramite il gruppo Telegram ho cominciato a partecipare io alle traduzioni proprio del sito web su GitHub e ho formato la community dove eravamo stati invitati a unirvi e quindi do una mano a questo team che a mio parere sta veramente rivoluzionando tra i vari progetti disponibili sull'Internet of Things il settore, esattamente come, in quali motivi, in quali modo ce lo dirà Henry, che è il responsabile del business development di IoTeX, che è qui da San Francisco. E welcome Henry. Thank you so much.
So what he's pulling it up. My name is Larry from San Francisco. My brother's actually getting married in Italy in a few days. So here on a little family vacation before, enjoying your beautiful country, and very happy to meet all of you guys here. Today I'm going to be talking about my company. It's called IoTeX. As Simone mentioned, we're doing IoT on blockchain, and I think a lot of the familiar use cases of blockchain deal with financial transactions, whether it's payments, micro loans, things like that. But a lot of traction is being put into the intersections of blockchain that see other kind of use cases. One of them is the Internet of Things. So you think about all the different things in the room, anything that can be connected to the internet will be connected to the internet. Right now there's 8 billion IoT devices in the world. Think about phones, smart cars, smart refrigerators, all these different devices. In the next 5 years, that's going to get multiplied by 10. So around 80 billion devices by 2023. We can walk through some more in the presentation, but that's kind of the use case that we're ultimately trying to solve. Thank you so much. So here's our agenda. I just wanted to, I'll walk through this presentation over the next half hour or so. If you have any questions, feel free to just ask. If you want to make this more of a discussion than just a presentation. So any questions, just feel free to ask. And we'll also have some questions after this session. I'm going to be talking more around the technology and the use cases, but if you guys have any other questions on the team or the token or things like that, feel free to ask as well. So I want to start by just introducing what is IoT today, right? So IoT, as I mentioned, anything that can be connected to the internet will be connected to the internet. Going to grow 21% annually. Not only the number of devices, but the kind of the quality of the devices, the amount of data, the types of data that the devices can collect is also going to increase. So not only maybe the number of devices is linear, but the amount of data collected is almost exponential. It's estimated by 2025, the global market of IoT will be around $11.1 trillion. But so today's IoT, what is it, right? We have all these different devices that are basically gathering different kinds of data, right? We call them edge devices. They can be sensors that are out in the desert. They can be this computer. They can be kind of anything, just gathering different kind of metrics. So for example, if I'm a supply chain company, the data that I'm gathering is maybe the location of my goods from start to the end of the supply chain process. If I'm a smart home company, I can have a smart air conditioner that's just tracking the temperature and turning on or off, and all different kinds of use cases, right? All these things are kind of stored today, whether it's on an on-prem database or whether it's on the cloud. But that's kind of where IoT stops. That's kind of the ceiling that we've hit today. We're able to gather all this very useful information, use it for our own benefit, and it's already adding a lot of enhancements to our business processes and our daily lives. But one thing we can't do is share this data kind of seamlessly, right? If I'm on Amazon Cloud, you're on Google Cloud, Simone's on Oracle on-prem database, we're not interoperable. We can't send data. We have to pull data off the cloud. We have to send it. We have to put data back on the cloud. So that's a very big limitation to what we're doing today. So in a nutshell, IoT is adding amazing things to the world, but really are we realizing the full potential of IoT, right? So when I think about IoT, some things I daydream about are, robots being able to coordinate with other robots, autonomous networks where, I can say something as a command, it's trigger all these different kind of devices to do kind of complex different workflows. And also do it in a very secure and private fashion, right? IoT is having a lot of traction today because companies are offering these services where they will ship you a package of sensors, and it's very easy to install. But all of the data is going back to that company, and they're holding the data for you, and they're analyzing the data for you. You don't have full control of your data. And in the U.S., I'm not sure if there's been big data breaches in Italy, but the Facebook scandal Even though these centralized parties under GDPR, the data policy, is very secure, you never know what they're doing with your data or what kind of leaks can happen. So some big things that are wrong with IoT today, there's a privacy concern, multiple handoffs between multiple different parties. There's a big lack of scalable infrastructure. So if I'm an IoT company, or if I'm a company and I want to start gathering data from my devices, I most likely have to go to a third party or to a vendor. I can't just create my own hardware and build my own software to gather all this data. It's almost always you're going to a different third party. And also high cost for manufacturing and operation. Not only is it difficult to stand up your IoT networks, it's also very costly to maintain. So we think that as a company doing blockchain, we think blockchains has a lot of native benefits that can help this problem, right? So just walking through this a little bit. So blockchain technology has a lot of native benefits built into it, right? One is it has a scalable infrastructure. If all of us are part of a blockchain network and another guy walks in the room, he could just stand up a full node and he could be part of our network. And that's an ability to scale very quickly. The hardware and operational costs via a token economy, not using hard fiat numbers, but crypto economic incentives, is a more fair and equitable way to kind of understand what something is valued at, right? It's a free market. People kind of set the price of the token themselves. So this is a good way to control the economics of it as well. And finally, there's a lot of different native benefits around pseudonymity, meaning there's not a direct link to your, I guess, real-world persona. There's privacy, which is kind of optional. There's a lot of big privacy projects out there. Monero, Zcash, Enigma, using privacy for different purposes, mostly to just protect the data, meaning hiding the sender, hiding the receiver, and also hiding the value. Immutability, meaning that once data is on the blockchain and the block is verified, then you can't really go back and change that data. It's always going to be on the blockchain, which is great for things like insurance, traceability of data, and things like that. And finally, programmability is a big one. I think someone mentioned some of the smart contract platforms out there. If you think about all of the things that are good with Bitcoin, there's not really a programmable way to use Bitcoin. It's not a platform, but projects like Ethereum, Cardano, things like that are using smart contracts to ultimately set business logic and make code law in the IoT world. So today's Internet of Things, there's a lot of heterogeneous devices, right? Different types of devices operating under different standards. It's very hard to control all of that kind of on set of different siloed systems, right? So not only is data transfer difficult, but accommodating all these different standards is very difficult. And some of the other existing blockchain platforms out there are mostly just for one specific general purpose use case. They're not really focused on the heterogeneity of it. Another thing is, a lot of high scalability is required to support all the devices in today's world, as I mentioned. And on other existing blockchain platforms, the scalability thing, the TPS that everyone talks about, is something that's not really solved either. There's three ways to kind of manage scalability. One is through your choice of consensus mechanism. One is around this concept called sharding, which is basically you take the blockchain, break it into a lot of different smaller blockchains. And the third is around layer 2 scaling, which is things like subchain architectures. If you're familiar with Ethereum, it's kind of what they're doing with Plasma. So that's the scalability issue. No one's really solved it yet. And finally, the privacy concerns in today's Internet of Things is a big topic, right? We kind of operate under this structure where a small set of companies own all the data, and everyone else is kind of being has to use those things because that's the only option they have around banks, social media, and things like that. And on blockchain, privacy is possible, but it's still farther away. So that's where thinking about this problem. That's kind of what IoTeX what our mission is to solve a lot of these issues. So the three things that our project really focuses on is privacy, it's interoperability, and it's about scalability, right? And we think all of these things are absolutely needed to support a blockchain for IoT. So we leverage all of the other kind of native benefits, immutability, traceability, programmability, but what makes us really unique and different is we tailor fit these three concepts around privacy, interoperability, and scalability to the Internet of Things. So just taking a step back a little bit. So IoTeX, we are the infrastructure layer. We're kind of the platform for people to build applications on top of. And when you think about, there's some applications that are starting to gain traction. One big one that was built on Ethereum is called Augur. It's a prediction market, and they just launched their product, and it's actually working pretty well. But if you think about the platform that you build things on top of, whether it's a programming language like Python or Java or Go language our blockchain is coded on, each of these languages has their own specific benefits and is more tailor fit to specific use cases. So when we design IoTeX, we think about the future of IoT. How do we think about what the Internet of Things is going to look like? So that's what we basically build our root chain around, to give people the ability to build out their revolutionary kind of applications in the next step. So just jumping into a little bit about IoTex's innovations, right? So we talked about IoT and blockchain and why they kind of maybe make sense. We focus on four things. We have our own consensus mechanism. It's called multi-post. For people that don't know about delegated proof of stake, it's used in projects such as EOS, which is one of the largest cryptocurrency projects in the world. Basically, what multi-post is a more democratic way to do depost. We use a randomized pool instead of a fixed number of delegates, and we can dive more into that. But we've also, designed the consensus mechanism to support different kinds of chain structures, which helps with interoperability. And also, we have instant finality, which is a good way to control the governance of a project. Other projects like EOS, the 21 delegates that you vote on, they can actually vote to roll back blocks, which means take back transactions, which affects the immutability of it. So all of our blocks have instant finality. The second thing that we're really focused on is privacy-preserving techniques. So in the blockchain world, right, every transaction has three components to it. It has a sender, it has a receiver, and it has the transaction value, right? So each of these things, to hide it, we use a different privacy-preserving technique. And there's multiple ways to do it. You guys maybe have heard of zero-knowledge proofs. That's used by Zcash. That's used to hide the receiver and the value. But the things that we focus on are, there's a concept called stealth addresses. So the project Monero, which is one of the more popular privacy projects in the blockchain space, they invented this protocol called dual key stealth address protocol. And we actually took that and enhanced it to make it more suitable for IoT. And we can talk about that in a bit. Another privacy-preserving technique we use is ring signatures. And finally, we use zero-knowledge proof to hide the value. The third one that I think is actually very, very unique to what we're trying to do is the blockchain and blockchain architecture. And we can dive deeper into that. And the ultimate goal is around autonomous device coordination. How do we use all these different innovations to make a private kind of ecosystem where people can orchestrate all of their devices, their IoT devices, using smart contracts, and also retain their data, and also share their data in a completely private way. So, starting with multi-posts, I mentioned delegated proof of stake. So, Bitcoin, one of the most popular cryptocurrency, they use proof of work, which is an algorithm that basically requires everyone in the network to verify that the latest block is legitimate, right? But it reaches a definite consensus. But the tricky part is it takes a lot of work to get everyone to reach consensus on something. A project called EOS thought it would be a good idea to choose a certain smaller number of delegates, 21, to reach consensus on the entire blockchain, right? So that sounds like a great idea, but you're kind of centralizing an already decentralized ecosystem. So that's one of the big criticisms that it has. So DPoS, delegated proof of stake, is a consensus framework that limits the block production to a fixed number of semi-trusted delegates. You vote on these people, but you don't necessarily know if they're going to try to, be selfish and take away your funds or something like that. This results in faster block production, high throughput, and low latency. So all great things. So DPoS is already used by projects such as EOS, LISC, and Tezos, which are some of the bigger blockchain projects in the world. But why did we choose to enhance DPoS, right? We thought that, a lot of things, including the instant finality, were things that we wanted to improve. And also, DPoS is good, but it doesn't really support our subchain architecture, and it doesn't really support large-scale IoT decentralized applications that we want to support in the future. So we chose to create a brand new consensus mechanism, and I'll explain kind of how DPoS works. So I know it's a lot of text, so I'll just talk through it. So every blockchain needs to reach some kind of consensus, right? And there's multiple ways to do it, and they range in differences in speed, differences in finality, and differences in decentralization, right? So DPoS we tailor fit specifically to IoTeX, where a new set of, we call them delegates or block producers, every epoch or every X number of blocks will choose a new set of delegates. And it's out of a randomized pool. So the process is, if all of us were in the network, right, and maybe this group right here wanted to become delegates, they would self-nominate themselves, and they would display, hey, this is my hardware, this is my software, you should vote for me to represent the network, based on also like a reputation score, or also maybe the quality of your contributions to the project. So anyone that holds a token can participate in this voting process. One token equals one vote in the network. And all the top vote getters will form a candidate pool. So say maybe 100 people will get chosen to form this pool, and out of this pool we'll select an even smaller subset to be the block producers or the delegates, right? So the big thing is, instead of, EOS uses the vote getters, the top 21 vote getters as their delegates, we select them first as candidates and randomize the selection. And every X number of blocks, we kind of do this process over. So it's never the same 21 people or X number of people that are going to mine the blockchain. So that makes it more democratic. Some other things that we do are we use PBFT consensus, which is a practical Byzantine fault tolerance. It basically means that if 2/3 of the delegates that you choose agree on consensus, then that means that there can't be kind of a malicious attack. And again, the instant finality, I think, is a big key thing here. We use this thing called random beacon. It's a very big thing in the cryptography world. It's basically meant to say, it's basically a very secure, robust way to cryptographically prove that things are chosen randomly. And finally, the auto-scaling candidate pool. So, EOS, they use 21 delegates, which is fixed. But the way we're going to construct our network is based on the amount of data in the network, we're going to scale the number of candidates and the number of delegates to support the amount of data. We talked about privacy for a little bit, but just to recap, a lot of these things, our founding team, actually two of them are PhDs in cryptography from one of the top schools, University of Waterloo. They actually have a blockchain cryptography lab there, and the founders did their PhD research on lightweight cryptography. So how do you make sure all of these, all this data is secure, while also making it lightweight so it doesn't affect your TPS or your security. We use ring signatures, stealth addresses, and Peters improvements, or bulletproofs as they call them. And I think this is one of the more unique things around our project. So A lot of the other blockchains is just one big blockchain, right? In Simone's graphic, he had one block being attached, and it would kind of grow out the blockchain. But this is an architecture choice that we made. I mentioned something called layer 2 scaling, and projects like Ethereum are doing this concept called plasma to basically pull activity off of the root chain, and you'll process things off chain, and only when you need to will you send data back to the root chain to get permanently added to the blockchain, right? So we have a similar thing in the sense that we offer developers to create their own subchains. These subchains, you can stand up your own servers, and you can basically connect all of your devices together. You can make it private, or you can make it permissionless, which means public, right? The root chain is meant to be the manager of the subchains, and it's completely permissionless. So that's a real benefit because say that if I'm an insurance company or something and I don't necessarily have a subchain to operate, I don't have any connected devices, I can still stand up a full node on the root chain, which means I can be a receiver of the information. So there's different ways to participate in the IoTeX node. And one big thing around our project is, if you were just trying to make your own subchain here, you don't necessarily need blockchain. You can just have your own database, manage all of your data. It's kind of if you wanted to just operate your own subchain, it would kind of just look like this. You would have your own database here. If you don't find the need to share any of that data, maybe maybe IoTeX platform is not for you. But the real benefit is, almost real time. These subchains can share data with each other because they're building on the same infrastructure layer, right? So if I have data that I need to share with you, and we're operating on different clouds today, tomorrow maybe we can share data seamlessly. And the good thing is, a lot of this stuff is device data. So the state change in one device in my network can also trigger a state change in a device in your network. So think about all the different utilities companies that kind of make up this room here around AC, lighting, kind of emergency fire systems. All of these things can interact more cohesively and almost real time using our architecture. And just to dive a little bit more into the subchains, not only are you able to gather data from each of these devices, right? That's kind of what these devices are doing today. They're just collecting one single point of data, and it's already very valuable, whether it's the location of one of your trucks or the temperature of the cargo. What you really can't do anything about is you can't use this data to orchestrate with other devices. So not only are you able to trigger kind of state changes from device to device within your own network, you can also process that data, share it, sell it, use it to trigger other state changes in other kind of networks. So that's where this kind of transfer of value and data between subchains via the root chain, that's kind of what we do. And ultimately, I talked a little bit about kind of the goals of a lot of blockchain platforms, right? Vitalik, who's the creator of Ethereum, has this concept of an impossible triangle, where he says no blockchain platform can have all three of these things, whether it's security, decentralization, and scalability, right? So if you think about that, a lot of the blockchain platforms today can't really sacrifice security. Security is one thing that a lot of blockchain platforms will not give up. So the real choice is around decentralization and scalability, meaning how fast you can process transactions. But that's kind of for the general purpose blockchain world. In the IoT world, you also have to think about two other things around privacy, which we think, so there's some other IoT projects out there on the blockchain, but they aren't doing privacy, which we think is a big mistake. Based on the sensitivity of the data that these devices you're managing in the future is going to be incredibly important. And the other one is around interoperability, having different networks being able to to interoperate with each other. So a lot of people think that a lot of our innovations that we talked about, our architecture, our consensus mechanism, and our privacy preserving techniques are just kind of fancy things that we're throwing together because, and that's what everyone else is doing. But these are all very well thought out kind of concepts that ultimately merge together, right? So in this graph, we kind of show the effect of all of our innovations on different kind of trade-offs, right? And I left out security because that's not really something that we're trading on either. So with our architecture, with privacy, if you want to create a private subchain, you can also add a public key infrastructure around it, so you can control who has access to your subchain. So that's a boost in privacy. Around scalability, another thing to mention is, in this diagram we only show 3 subchains, but the good thing with kind of these types of layer 2 architectures is you can add as many subchains as you want, and because you're kind of standing them up on your own servers, there's kind of an unlimited amount of scalability, if you will, right? Like our ultimate goal, maybe in one and a half years, will be to do a couple thousand transactions per second on the root chain, a couple thousand on each subchain. But the good thing is, if you need more transactions per second than that, you can just build 2 subchains and have them communicate with each other. So that's an important other point around our architecture. Around interoperability, this is definitely a big plus. Our architecture is meant to enable communication across different kinds of device networks. And it doesn't really have too big of an effect on decentralization. Privacy is obviously, there's full native privacy within the transactions. So all of the sender-receiver value are fully encrypted. Because this is kind of like an add-on to the transaction, right? So for example, to hide the transaction sender, we have this concept called a ring signature, which basically says, if I'm transacting one-on-one with Simone, I will get 3 other people to sign the same transaction. So he knows that it came from one of us 4 people, but he doesn't know how many people or who exactly it was, right? So that's an add-on to the transaction, which makes it more heavyweight. So this is actually a reduction in scalability, but we try to make up for it using our architecture and our consensus mechanism. So we chose delegated proof of stake instead of a proof of work kind of consensus mechanism, because we knew that if we chose proof of work, we wouldn't be able to support the number of transactions per second that we would need for our network. Consensus mechanism also adds in native heterogeneity built into the multi-post mechanism, and I would call this a plus/minus. So dpost is less decentralized or more centralized than proof of work, but in the proof of work space, in Bitcoin, for example, there's a concept of mining units, ASICs, that are kind of centralizing that as well anyway. So we can call it a plus/minus, but I think after this, after you look into different other blockchains, especially smart contract platforms, this is a good framework to think about how to assess different projects. Like, are they innovating on something that is ultimately going to be used for their use case? And how do they kind of think about the trade-offs between scalability, decentralization, and security, as well as privacy, their privacy platform. And all of this is to say, a lot of going back to the vision we have for the future, right? We believe in this world where very, very quickly, maybe in the next 3, 4, 5 years, devices are going to be so intelligent, right? Like, you think about your phone, for example. Just in the past 3, 4, 5 years, maybe 6 versions of the iPhone have came out and adding new and new features. The same is going on in these very low power, long range IoT devices that you can put in the desert. It can live for 10 years and it can send data maybe once a day for 10 years at a time. And that technology exists today. Think about kind of the power that these devices will have in 4 or 5 years, right? They'll be able to, we believe you'll be able to program specific goals for these devices, right? And they can talk to other devices to achieve that goal. Trade value, trade data, creating this kind of ecosystem where devices all coordinate with each other. We call it machine-to-machine interaction, and that kind of forms the foundation for really autonomous networks. We really think about self-driving cars or smart cities or smart power, things like that. You really need all of these devices to be able to coordinate with each other, respond to environmental factors real time, trade data real time for that to happen. So we don't, I mean, not to say that IoT today is not valuable, it is, but we think that it's hit a certain ceiling, and we think blockchain is going to be a great way to kind of address those kind of things. And just to wrap up this presentation, just want to talk about the founding team. So our team is composed, we don't have too big of an engineering team, but all of them are very, very, not only, most of them are PhDs. I think we have 9 PhDs right now and 2 master's students in machine learning, distributed systems, cryptography, but they're also industry veterans. So our co-founder Rowland, he used to lead the cryptography research and development team at Uber. Before that, he was an infrastructure engineer at Google. And our head of cryptography, Xinjing, he worked at Bosch, which is a German device manufacturer. He's a lead research scientist there for 14 years. Kevin, he's a PhD in machine learning and computer vision, which is basically AR, VR. He joined Facebook in 2011, so a very early person in Facebook. And Jane, she's our investment and operations lead. She comes from the VC world, so she knows kind of what makes a company fail, what makes a company succeed. And I think if you look at the different profiles of the founding team, everyone has their own unique kind of value add, right? Rowland is more on the blockchain development side. Kevin's on making sure the product succeeds. Jing is more on handling all the kind of outside things outside of the technology. And Xinjing is actually leading a lot of the research and development, not just within the company, but we'll be announcing some pretty interesting partnerships in the future with in the research space. Again, we have a lot of different PhDs and master's students working with us, and different members of the marketing, business development, and community management team as well. In addition, we have a very robust set of advisors. So our main advisor is in the middle. His name is Jack Lee. He still is an executive at Foxconn, which is one of the largest device manufacturers in China. And he's been really helping us. As you can tell, a lot of the company is Chinese, but we operate out of San Francisco. But we have a very, very big community in China and Asia in general. We also have a big community in America. But the next real big step for us is coming to Europe. We see a lot of energy in the blockchain space, especially coming out of Germany. Hopefully, more people in Italy will kind of ride the wave and see the future of blockchain. But I think Jack is helping us in a lot of ways, including connecting us with different kind of IoT companies. We also have a research fellow, Professor Gong, and Fan, who was one of the very early members of Sequoia Capital, which is a huge VC in China. Sure. In addition, we have a lot of different investors. So maybe to talk about the token a little bit, we didn't do a public sale or an ICO. We see ourselves as a very long-term technology-first company. So instead of doing a public sale, putting 25% of the tokens in the hands of the public, just so they can dump on the exchanges, we wanted to reserve a lot of that for more long-term partnerships to kind of facilitate. I mentioned we're the infrastructure layer, but to make this blockchain and IoT intersection work requires a lot of different kind of participants, whether it's device manufacturers, research institutions, big enterprises and institutions in the world. We're saving a lot of that token allocation to drive progress on that front. I'm not sure if any of these are familiar, but these are some of the more larger cryptocurrency-focused and blockchain-focused VCs and funds in the world. We have around 85,000 people in our community right now, and that's across Telegram, Twitter, and different kind of other social media channels. We're really looking to expand this and also concentrate it. A lot of people think about, oh, how many people do you have in your Telegram? Maybe we have around 60,000 right now. But the next step for us, I think we've grown a big community. The next step for us is really finding the people that really care about the technology and not just about the hype of the project. And we're starting to see a lot of those people come out. We're operating in over 50 countries, and yeah, that's kind of all I have. So, any questions?
You already done the ICO?
So we didn't do an ICO, we only did a private sale in February. Yeah. So we sold to 40 accredited investors. And at that time, we raised 25,000 ETH. In February, it was trading around like anywhere between 500 to 1,000, but at that time, it's like 900 for 24% of the token. So that's around, let's say, 100 million valuation. Right now, the token is trading, I think, like
2.8 cents.
2.8 cents. Yeah, maybe 3-4x that price. So I still think we're very early in the project. Wink, buy some IoTeX. But yeah.
In which phase do you stay? You are IoTeX? No,
Which type of the roadmap?
ho visto Nio, quindi immagino sia un programma fatto con Nio al momento.
No. Io ho investitore.
Io
I'm an investitor.
Okay.
He asked me if you had kind of a partnership with Neo because he saw it into the investors.
Oh, I see. So Neo has a venture arm. It's called Neo Global Capital. So they actually invest in other projects too.
It's the same Neo of the
Same Neo.
cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
What about the cross-chain for the future? There's so many projects talk about cross-chain platform between different cryptocurrencies. For example, cross from Ethereum to Litecoin.
I see.
For example.
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
I think
cross-chain future.
Yeah, I think there's like a couple aspects of it, right? Having blockchains and other blockchains be able to transfer data to each other. And there's also the concept of oracles where you're bringing in outside data onto the blockchain, right? And I think to really have, especially for IoT, I think not everyone's going to jump onto IoTeX from day one, but being able to merge data across networks is really the goal of our project, right? And to exclude kind of non-blockchain data would be kind of not smart from our end. So it's not something that our project is focused a lot on. But there's different projects. One's called NKN, New Kind of Network. It's actually a very new, promising company, and they're working on providing kind of secure ways to bring outside data onto the blockchain over TCP/IP. So just the general internet protocol. But as far as kind of the blockchain to blockchain interaction, I definitely think that's needed, right? Because in the IoT world, it's not to say that that data wouldn't be useful to other projects or other kind of things where the real value in all this, I mentioned, like IoT right now is generating these single points of data, right?
Like a seed.
Exactly. Going back to this thing, like all of these things are generating single points of data, right? All these little IoT devices, and one company can group their data and run some analysis on it, and then they can see, okay, hey, I know these new perspectives, or I add this analysis, right? It's really so that's already adding a lot of value. To create like new products and new services, you not only need to intersect your own data with each other, you need to intersect your data with other people's data in a private way, in a shareable way, and that's really what we think about blockchain in the future, right? It's not just about one person's subchain. It's about kind of this decentralized pool of data that anyone can leverage in a private and secure way. Yeah. But some interesting projects that are doing that, one called Cosmos, is doing like mesh networking on the chain.
Red chain.
Yeah, cork. Cork chain. Yeah. They're kind of sharding and things like that too. Yeah. So, yeah. Very good project. The technology is good, but we got bundled into some of their mess around circulating supply, which is unfortunate.
Maybe less.
Yeah, but that is a short-term kind of thing. There's a lot of noise. Yeah. Any other questions? So what are you guys working on in blockchain space?
I'm a co-founder of the project ICO,
Awesome.
called CEDA. Decentralized developers.
Very cool.
I'm the co-founder of the project. It's a project that was born in September 2016
Yeah.
from the founder, Vicitelli.
Yeah.
So it's a smart bit, so with a decentralized exchange, call it continue,
Yeah.
and make transaction off-chain, so with wrist-to-wrist
Yeah.
and cryptocurrency, with a token ERC in the 20.
Okay.
ERC time. Yeah.
Cool.
So it's a hard work, so smart bit is an idea that can be without IoT also, for decentralized ecosystem.
Yeah.
Because with a smart bit, with a wearable device, you can manage your storage
Yeah.
of cryptocurrency, you know? Because generate different code when you move your wrist,
Yeah.
and move your body,
Yeah.
generate a new key. So it can be different every time you move your body.
Interesting.
So generate a new key.
Yeah.
So with the Trezor, with the letter
Yeah.
S, you can store your cryptocurrency,
Yeah.
but with a moment of body,
Yeah.
with an accelerometer,
Yeah.
and with main fusion inside, per code fast. You can make payments off-chain fast and connect it to the chain.
Yeah. Which
So-
is not. It sounds
Yeah.
like you could build on that's one thing.
I'm not a technical.
Yeah.
I talked to, I read your white paper, I'm reading white papers.
Yeah.
And actually I suggested to one common contact to let you come here because I heard that you were basing your blockchain part on IoTA. Yeah. So I said, please come to the IoTeX because I think you should have a look at some chains here and maybe build your electronic part on your
I think it's important.
not on the other.
No.
Because of privacy missing and no smart contracts and also some kind of mess going on. You should
it's
definitely
different.
have a look into this.
Yeah. Should talk about this.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you? No. Yeah, I think, it's good to chat with you guys around what you guys are interested in the blockchain space too. Do you guys see IoT being looked at seriously in Italy? And which kind of use cases? I know like a lot of things around like transportation, logistics, and things like that. Maybe like smart homes and things like that? Or?
It's not easy, I think, to imagine.
Yeah.
Nobody could imagine what you could do with the internet. Probably,
Right.
actually, we saw it.
Yeah.
Also because I think it seems we really can do something. The real difference is the technology behind.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine actually what you can do more. You know?
Yeah.
It comes from being able to cross-communicate between what we already have
Yeah.
from different manufacturers. So,
Most people can see the end product without knowing that it's blockchain. I think will be a really big day. When you just live your normal life and you don't have to know, oh, this is a blockchain product. Even for payments, right? There's one company called Circle. They're doing free cross-border payments, and people don't even know it's running on blockchain. So when that day comes for a lot of the other use cases, will be kind of a mass adoption. But yeah, I think I think you mentioned something around the roadmap. Just wanted to share with that. So we launched 2 code releases so far. One is our testnet preview, which was basic blockchain functionality, and at the end of June we launched our testnet alpha, which incorporated our consensus mechanism. So right now there's an explorer on our website. You can kind of see the mock transactions, the fake transactions that we put on these Docker containers on the cloud, just kind of test out our consensus mechanism. In August is going to be a big release for us. We're going to launch our first initial implementation of cross-chain communication. So right now we're transitioning from something called UTXO record-keeping model to account-based record-keeping model. And once that happens, people will start to kind of compartmentalize data in subchains and be able to transfer kind of small amounts of data for now, but ultimately we're building out more and more. In October, we're looking to launch our mainnet, which is going to be a pretty big release for us as well. But ultimately, I think our timeline, a lot of people are starting to launch their mainnet, like different projects already. Our stable mainnet, meaning we can really do a lot of the things that we envision, is actually pretty far away, it's still like a year away. Even with like the talented kind of developer team that we have, this is a very ambitious project. Just to make sure all the different innovations work together as we envision. I think we've got a lot done already. We're starting to build out a really big community, but I think this project is really great. Like I've been in the blockchain space for maybe a year now, just like looking at different projects, obviously trying to trade and make some money. But I read this white paper once, and it was like that for me. I was like, I got to join this company. I was a management consultant before this. Graduated from MIT, and then went into consulting for 5 years or so. And right when I read it, just ready to do my job, just jump into it. So it's been a good decision, and I hope you guys join us for the rest of our journey.